And you know what else is really cool about cannabis? It's the female plant. It's the female. It's the female. If she gets fertilized by the male, she can't bloom. She would have seeds.
Yeah.
She'll have babies. If you want to smoke or use cannabis, we need the flower. So we need, in a sense, the virgin. So her potency, she's potent. The cannabis plant is potent in being fully feminine. And I think she empowers us to become powerful feminine.
So yeah, maybe to start, you can tell me a little bit about your experience with your orgasm after finding cannabis. You've spoken openly about how cannabis has helped you experience orgasm for the first time after 30 years of trying. Can you take us back to that moment? What changed for you emotionally, physically, that other therapy techniques hadn't managed to achieve before?
Wow. Well, it's a long, I'm going to say a long story, like trying to put it on a map. Like if I were to try to design this story. So for me, like orgasm was this elusive thing, right? Like I had one through oral sex with my husband when I was like, after several months of trying, then I was like, oh my God, what was that? And then my body wouldn't let me have it again. Like we tried to control it. Like we meaning my body, me and myself and I was like, well, we want that, but we don't really want to let go to have it. Was kind of like, it was scary because I didn't really feel that safe with this guy anyway. Like, you know, I didn't feel safe with him. I guess that was, the bottom line looking back as being 19 years old. So I couldn't have it. Like that was it. And then I tried to have orgasms and they weren't pleasurable. They were just this release with I'm like, what was that? So I kept trying and I kept trying, because I'm somebody who would get A's in school. Like I knew how to I knew about trying.
Yeah.
Well, trying doesn't work with orgasm. That's what I learned. So anyway, well, fast forward, I did end up seeing my first sex therapist. I saw 1, 2, 3, I think 4 total over 30 years. So I saw the first one. And interestingly, her name was Ginger Bush. I got a little red book in the mail, like because this was 1980s, right? So I got a little red book in the mail. I had one child already. The second one was on her way. Second one was on the way. I went to see a therapist and I was in therapy. I set some goals for myself, going back to school, etc. And I did have some orgasms with him in my marriage, but we ended up getting divorced, right? That's another whole story of being in an emotionally abusive relationship, which I didn't know. So, orgasm is kind of like a barometer of how's your relationship. In my opinion, it can be a barometer in my experience. And with women that I've interviewed, that's another topic. So fast forward to sex therapist number 4, which was like in 2017, early 2018. And I had so much shame about this orgasm problem because then once I got divorced, like I couldn't orgasm. I didn't have pleasurable, or I could orgasm, but nothing was pleasurable. Like it was just this, I'm like, what is this? And interestingly on Reddit, there's a thread called Ruined Orgasms with like 1 million people, like 500,000 subscribers to 1 million orgasms. So I saw the fourth sex therapist and I was like, you know what? Therapy isn't working. This isn't working. I tried, this is number 4. And I had read about a guy named Rinpoche who had healed his gangrene with meditation. And I thought, he healed his gangrene, had 3 doctors who said you need to cut off your leg. And if you Google him, and I learned about him, and I was like, oh my God, if he could heal his gangrene in 8 months of meditation, then I can heal my orgasm with meditation. Like that was my initial entry point. So I canceled therapy. I'm like, you know what? We're not going to do therapy anymore. This healing is an inside job.
Yeah.
This healing is an inside job. It's not something that's going to be fixed. I kept thinking the therapist had some special formula that they were going to tell me or unlock something. I tried EDMR therapy. I had done some breath work and tantra work. I had seen her name was Betty Dobson. I had flown to New York and had a private session with Dr. Betty Dobson and still nothing, because I realized what really needed to change was I had to heal my brain. Like I had to heal as one woman described it when I interviewed her, I thought she gave a great description. So she was in the process of learning how to orgasm with cannabis. And she said to me, her brain would tell her, you're about to orgasm. Just so you know, you're getting ready to orgasm. And she would tell her brain, thank you. And that's not really helpful. Like, so that is the hypervigilance. That's called hypervigilance. And that's like a woman I just saw a post on Becoming Orgasmic where a woman said, I can feel the pleasure. I just can't let go. That's the spot. So that's the access point that cannabis gives. So with my partner, so I had a partner for a period of time. I had tried orgasmic meditation, which was something that was big in London. In fact, there's still a big community in London. And that's a practice that helped me release the shame, where I had this shame around this problem. Like, so I had the problem, right? And then I had it wrapped around in this shame because I didn't want to bring it into relationships. It made me feel inadequate. It made me feel, but at the same time, I was an elected official. I ran businesses successfully, so it's like, I called it this problem in my pocket, and so this guy used cannabis, and my husband had been addicted to cannabis, so I never used cannabis with my husband. I hated the idea of cannabis. I was totally against cannabis. And anyway, he was like, okay, I quit cannabis. I said, good, wonderful. Well, a couple months into our relationship, he tries it again. And he turned out to be addicted to it also, but that's a separate story. But anyway, I tried it with him. I thought, you know what, I got to undo some patterns. And the bottom line was, after 3 months of using it, so while I started using it with him, I hated surrendering. My mind loved being in control. My mind loved being in charge of everything. It says, we can do everything for you, Suzanne. We just can't help you let go when you want to orgasm.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were in Italy, in Padua, and I had a hit of cannabis, and 2.5 hours later we had sex, and well, I'm just going to tell you what happened. He had his fingers inside me for ejaculate. I didn't know what he was doing, but my brain and my body was like, oh my God, this is pleasurable. And I leaned back, and then the good girl in me propped myself back up, and he said, I got you, baby. And I leaned back and just felt the pleasure. And the next thing he said, you're coming, baby, you're coming. And I burst into tears. So we didn't know if it was going to happen. It gives me the chills right now. Like, I literally have chills on my body as I say that to you. So we didn't know if it was going to happen again. Anyway, it ended up it happened again. And then it would happen multiple times. I had never orgasmed like that in my life. Now there's a question of was it orgasm? Was it ejaculation? To me, it was orgasm with ejaculation. I let go. Like, I was able to completely surrender into the pleasure, completely, without my brain questioning, are we coming? Are we not coming? Or where are we in this? None of that. I was just absorbed in the moment. Anyway, it began to happen whether I used cannabis or not. That was the way I would orgasm in that relationship. And then after that relationship ended, I felt that old feeling coming back about having the problem again. And I thought, you know what? That's when the Rinpoche thing happened. And that's when I took it on myself. So anyway, I'm telling you a long story here, but I developed my own pleasure practice, and I ended up inviting several women that I knew. I said, do you ladies we'll do this for 1.5 years. We were on the call every week. I developed several meditations that I would listen to that are online. I recorded them I have like more than 500 tapes of myself in this process, because it was painful too, emotionally. I would cry about, okay, I had what I would call not a bad orgasm, but an orgasm. Now I don't think of any orgasm as a bad orgasm, but back then I was very judgmental about my orgasm. I had to undo and unlearn old patterns, and cannabis taught me how to do that. That's the bottom line. So that's the just abbreviated story of a lifelong problem that got solved with cannabis. And I'll just share with you how I started to access the orgasm with the cannabis. Was I learned to fantasize. It would take me into a place, and I would set a time for it, practice consistently. I would journal, and I stopped judging. I had to stop the whole aspect of judgment, that we're in a relearning process. We are in a retraining process. And again, bursting into tears. I remembered, I rewired, like I remember the time that I was able to have access to orgasm by myself was recalling how I had orgasm the first time with my husband, like bringing the exact scene back. And cannabis will allow you to do that. It allows you to bring it's one of the most powerful fantasy makers there is. And that's been in history for 50 years. So, you know, that's how I relearned how to do it. And anyway.
Amazing. Yeah, that's incredible. And I suppose that sort of takes me on to one of my other questions, talking about how, well, you discuss, and one of your theories is how cannabis helps women enter these altered states of consciousness. And
absolutely.
Yeah, you describe these orgasms as spiritual or transcendental experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about that, and maybe how if we've maybe misunderstood what orgasm is for women compared to men?
Very, very good. So I'm working with a psychiatrist. His name is Dr. Michael Schwartz, and he's on our board of the Female Orgasm Research Institute. What I make is we're developing an arc of healing around orgasm, and this altered state of consciousness is one of the arcs of healing. And when I speak of healing, I speak of what you're talking about, like the oneness with the self, that orgasm gives access to the oneness with the self. So when women, again, going on becoming orgasmic on the Reddit thread, and my own experience of like, I want this thing, I have to have this thing. Men's orgasm, and he just shared this with the other day, like men don't need to go into an altered state of consciousness. And it's actually in the last definition. So, you know, I went in and studied. After I started this transition and I got my orgasm, I sold my company and went back to school to get my PhD. I'm like, I'm going to study this thing. You know, like I want to know like this 30-year thing. Like, so the altered state of consciousness, I'll tell you what the theory and what the model, the treatment model is, that cannabis creates an altered state of consciousness. We know that. I mean, you can research, we can just Google it. Does cannabis, they call it psychoactive. So it activates I would say even our psychic abilities. It activates something within ourselves that my own system resisted. And when we learn how to surrender, the altered state of consciousness theory says when we learn how to surrender to cannabis, you can learn how to surrender to orgasm. That they're parallel, because cannabis requires, you know, people say, I had a panic attack. I had a panic attack too, the first time I used it, when I took it before going into a physics class when I was, you know, I don't know, 18 or 19. Oh, I haven't had a cannabis, Suzanne. We're walking into class. I'm like, oh, sure. And I end up having a panic attack because like, that's not the place to be having an altered state of consciousness, you know? So learning that altered states of consciousness are safe. That is, again, the baseline of orgasm is safety. We have to feel safe, right? So if we can learn how to feel safe and enter the altered states of consciousness, then we give ourselves access to orgasm, which thrives in the altered state. So we have the orgasm inside of all of ourselves. It's not that it's out there. I used to think it was out there and somebody was going to give me a formula on how to bring it to my body. It's in ourselves. What we do is we unlock the pathways to it. So I don't know if does that explain it, or if you have a follow-up question.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what do you think it is that happens in the brain when that sort of surrender finally happens, or emotionally as well? You know, you mentioned earlier about how women, you know, it brings them back to their self.
Well, I can share with you several scientific things that happen in the brain with cannabis. And one of them that relates to what we're talking about. One of them is one of the other theories or treatment models is the amygdala reduction treatment model. And the amygdala reduction, so the amygdala is the part of the brain that stores the trauma. So when we talk about a woman, for example, who I've talked about, who was raped as a teenager and couldn't orgasm at all, from nothing, or a woman who's had any trauma, even childhood, you know, even belittling, even being in a patriarchal relationship, being undermined, being spoken to inappropriately, being emotionally abused, that stores in the amygdala, the part of the brain. The THC, and this is for PTSD also. PTSD is a condition of treatment for medical cannabis. The amygdala, the cannabis reduces the activity in this part of the brain. So when the woman, for example, we were talking about earlier, who's like, you're going to orgasm, or, trying to give us a warning of this thing that's going to happen in our body, or myself who had anxiety attacks, like, we don't want to enter anything that's going to resemble, like having an anxiety attack is similar in a way, to something that happens to us, right? Well, orgasm happens to us also. So these things can be related, and they can be fearful. Yeah. They can become fearful when we don't feel safe in letting go. So that's the amygdala reduction is one of the ways, one of the things that happens in the brain. Another thing is in the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is what's called our executive functioning. That's the part, like my body loves that part, like my brain loves to be in charge of everything. Like she says, we can help you with everything, Suzanne. Like we think we can help you, but they think they can help you with orgasm, but they can't. But anyway, so it quiets the prefrontal cortex. So it quiets the judgment. It quiets the overthinking. It quiets the, am I going to come this time? It quiets, am I taking too long? It quiets, I feel broken. It quiets the pattern. So there's another model called dishabituation theory, because then it dishabituates, meaning if someone has a habit of always overthinking when they're pleasuring themselves or when they're having sex, then that habit gets derailed. And the sensation, we know that cannabis enhances sensation and touch, and it allows us, a woman who I mentioned who was raped, who orgasmed the first time she used cannabis. So sometimes it works the very first time because these things that happen in the brain, and she was with a partner that she loved. She felt, again, that word safe. It happened. Like it quiets parts of the brain that allows the body to have an experience without the brain managing it.
Interesting. Thank you so much. And that's so interesting. Yeah, I think there can be a lot of pressure on women when they start getting to that point. And like you said, am I taking too long? The pressure can sort of build up, and then you almost psych yourself out a little bit.
Totally. I mean, you're totally right. And if we get to that thinking, I had a friend write to me and said, because we used to talk about this in high school, so she wrote a message to me and she said, anytime I get into my thinking, she says, I remember what Suzanne said, return to the pleasure, and it's like, how do you return to the pleasure? Well, that's another, like a toolkit. So the toolkit of returning to pleasure is, it could even be asking the partner to stop. Can you just stop for a second? I just need to get recentered, and then invite the partner to restart, like whatever doorway, maybe it's breath. Let's just breathe together for a second, let's just do eye gazing for just 1 second for 30 seconds. So returning to the pleasure whenever the mind takes us on a trip.
Amazing. It's almost a more somatic approach.
Exactly. Using the body, inviting the body to be part of our transformation, because women will talk about like not liking the way their body looks, or they're not happy with this or that. And it's just, I think this was therapist number 2 or 3. I saw many therapists, 4 sex therapists and other therapists. And one therapist was like, can you accept it that you have this problem? And I was like, absolutely not. I mean, I was like 20 something. Absolutely accept it. And now I'm at a point where, how do we become friends with right where we are? Because if we can accept that I'm right here, that can allow me to, like, I never would have known that I would be doing what I'm doing, that I would have healed. I just, when we're in the middle of it, it's awful.
Oh, bless. Well, it's amazing the work that you've been doing. And, there's women who you have worked with who have regained their ability to orgasm after surgeries as well. So
yes,
all trauma to the body. How do you think cannabis works in that way, as well as the avenue of the mind, the altered state, surrender? Is there something more at play on the physical side, relaxation, pain relief? And how does it make you feel when you hear of these women who have...
Oh my God. They love to tell their story. They love, like, I interviewed 40 women for my dissertation, and I had over 1,000 women fill out a survey for my research on cannabis and female orgasm. And we had 387 that were part of our survey, but I'm going to focus on one woman's story that that she had shared with me and what actually happens with the brain. So there's another one of the models or the theories, the treatments is called neuroplasticity treatment model. So the neuroplasticity treatment model would be a woman who lost her ability to orgasm. And that could be the woman in Oregon, for example, who's petitioning the state. Her name's Rebecca Anderson. She has gone public with her story. She had a radical hysterectomy and that took out her cervix and she orgasmed cervically. Well, that part of her body was gone. And she said she started dabbling in cannabis and she learned new ways to orgasm. So what happens with the brain body connection is that you develop what's called the brain. They used to think the adult brain, once we had the brain, we were the same. But now they know there's something called neuroplasticity, that the brain can continue to grow and change. So she developed new neural pathways, between her genitals and her brain. And then once these pathways became stronger, she can orgasm. Whether they became stronger or they happened the first, she started dabbling. Another woman had 3 surgeries that changed the shape of her vagina. She lost her ability to orgasm and she started looking and sex became painful. She started looking for new ways to, for sex to be pleasurable again. And she stumbled on cannabis. Most women stumbled on it. It's not like a first place that people go. Like I'll just share with you in Switzerland, they're doing pilot studies with cannabis. You can go and get a prescription. You can go and get cannabis in Switzerland right now for part of a pilot study. 80% of the people who are going to get it are male. Only 20% are women. So if we can get the word out there in Switzerland that it's been statistically proven that cannabis can improve sexual functioning. Maybe we'd have 80% women going to get prescriptions in Switzerland instead of 20. So anyway, she relearned, it took her a year, this woman who had lost her ability to orgasm from the 3 surgeries. And she said it was through trial and error of just practice and consistency. And again, you talk about the neural pathways, building the connection to the brain, the pleasure with the brain. And it took her up to a year to get her orgasm back, but she got it back. So the theme there is don't give up.
Yeah, definitely. That's an incredible story. And it's interesting as well because it says a lot to our lack of knowledge on the female orgasm. I think there's still quite a lot of people who might say it's not possible to orgasm through the cervix when women know that's
exactly it's her body.
Yeah, and it's what support do women have who have gone through surgeries like this, when it comes to regaining their sex life again, and cannabis should be in that toolkit. And you've been working with a lot of women to help get this as a treatment in different states. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. And first I want to just tell you that in the UK, going back to this women with like gynecological surgeries, the UK is called Banbury, Banbury. Banbury team in 2024 did a study in the UK on women with gynecological cancers, who got acquired. It's called acquired sexual dysfunction, meaning they didn't have it before the surgery. And that cannabis was statistically proven to help women improve their sexual functioning, orgasm function, when they used cannabis mindfully. Not just like, going to have a hit, but when they used it mindfully. So we've had so far success in 2 US states, Connecticut and Illinois, that has approved medical cannabis for treating women's orgasm difficulty. And that's been a huge success. The New Mexico Medical Cannabis Board has approved it, and we're waiting for their state level approval. Hopefully we'll get word from the Secretary of Health soon. We've had a number of states deny it. Ohio's denied it twice. The last time Ohio denied it, they said, well, most women have PTSD who have orgasm difficulty, so they can just go get it for PTSD. And that's kind of what about if most means more than 50%. So even if you say 51% of women have PTSD who have FOD, that leaves out 49% of the women who now they can't get cannabis. So they did, in my observation, they acknowledged that this problem exists, and it's just we're dealing with what the veterans dealt with when they tried to push forward PTSD back in 2013, 2014. The difference is there were very few studies at that point that showed PTSD helped, the cannabis helped PTSD. What they had was veteran testimony. So we have testimony from women. We have 50 years of research going back to Dr. Eric Good, who did the first cannabis and sex study in 1969. And in his book, The Marijuana Smokers, he talks about a 20-some-year-old woman that could only orgasm when she used cannabis, a divorcee. She was a divorcee. Yeah, I remember that. And then there's a woman there was a book written in 1970 by Barbara Lewis, The Sexual Power of Marijuana. And she talks about women who learned to orgasm with cannabis. So it's been around since the 70s, and we're excited to kind of bring this together. We have a 3-day hearing in Oregon. I don't know if it's going to be a public hearing, but we appealed. The petitioner boldly, who I mentioned had a radical hysterectomy and lost her ability to orgasm. She petitioned. She has a lawyer representing her, pro bono. Alex Tinker is his name, and that hearing is October 28th to 30th. And we have 13 expert witnesses speaking, medical doctors. Dr. Jordan Tischler will be presenting, Dr. Jennifer Wilson King, who was part of a study called the Casman study that showed for each increase of cannabis use frequency, female sexual dysfunction declined by 21%, from like twice a week to 3 times a week if women use frequency of use. Anyway, we have 13 experts that are going to be giving testimony at that meeting, and several women speaking to how cannabis helped them overcome orgasm difficulty. We're excited about that.
Yeah, really exciting. Incredible. Good luck, I hope.
Thank you. I mean, ironically, these denials actually give us a lot of awareness. We have a meeting, another one just denied it. Arizona just denied it. So we have a meeting with the law team in Arizona this next week to, take this issue all the way to Supreme Court if we need to.
Incredible. Wow. Well done. Amazing. And, I think this work, this petitioning, and like you mentioned earlier with, we have 20% of women in Switzerland going to get a prescription. We know that there is the orgasm gap. It's, the concept, we have 90% of men who orgasm most of the time, well, less than half of women do. Why do you think society has accepted that for so long, and how cannabis challenged that imbalance?
Such an interesting question. Why has society accepted that for so long? Well, that feels like if I could really answer that, we would have
a book.
We would have a book. We would have, why has society accepted it? I think we've been set up for it. So, I just posted something on Facebook about from 1955 about how women were supposed to behave when they were married. And I watched that, and this was 6 years before I was born that this thing came out as a video for women by like a major magazine or something about this is how women are supposed to behave when their husband comes home, how they're supposed to prioritize their husband's needs over their own. That was the essence of it. Mm-hmm. Prioritize your husband's needs over your own. Because we know in lesbian relationships, female to female, women have more orgasms. So there really isn't an orgasm gap when it's women to women. The orgasm gap exists when it's men to women. So I think the fact that that's number one. Women have been generationally, that theme of prioritizing a partner's needs over our own has been generationally transferred. I feel that I was one who, I saw my mom, I'm going to use the word cowering down to my father's desires as her being a housewife. And, I just shared this too. I remember my dad on Saturday morning would, he'd work. He was the worker. She was the homemaker. Now there's patriarchy's myth that that's how it always was in caveman times. That's not true. Women were out hunting too. It was equal society. So when my dad would come home and he'd open the fridge on Saturday morning and hell no, where's that goddamn? And this is the spot where I'm not like my mother was like, oh, Joe, I'll go to the store right now and get it for you. My voice would have been, don't talk to me like that.
Mm.
You can go to the store and get it yourself. So, but my mother gave me strength because he didn't want her to work. My dad, like, why work became important for women was because women couldn't live like that. We can't live like that. So my mother went to work. And anyway, so that question about why have women accepted this, there's a study out of Finland in 2017 by Mietinen and Kontula. It was like evaluating all of their data over like several generations of why. It was called the determinants of female orgasm. The bottom line, there were two major bottom lines out of that study. One of them was that the percentage of women who don't orgasm hasn't changed since, even though we have, there's more masturbation acceptable, masturbation or self-pleasure is more accepted, and there's sex therapy. That percentage, in fact, in the new Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders that came out in 2022, it now says up to 72% of premenopausal women have orgasm difficulty. 72%. So that was the one thing, is that the percentage of women suffering from this problem hasn't changed. And the second thing was they're trying to figure out why women are prioritizing their partner's pleasure more than their own. So, I think that this whole model of patriarchy plays a role in that. And, women's have been fighting for equality. Why do we have to fight for this?
Yeah.
Like, why isn't it just, we had to fight to get the right to vote. So women have become silenced and prioritize their partner's pleasure, yet remain, I would say, from my own experience, the wholeness that comes from being an orgasmic woman is something that I think gives us a sense of being a woman, of who we are. And it's what I know for myself, like I strived for that I couldn't, even having business success and being an elected official, it didn't give me what my orgasm gave me. Like, my orgasm is for me. It's for me. And it gives me a sense of, it just gives me a sense of me. And it's not even like, I don't even really, now that I know I can have it, it's like, do I want to have an orgasm, or am I tired and want to go to sleep? Like, like I don't have to, it doesn't have to be this striving thing anymore, because I have it. It's available when I want it.
Amazing. And do you think it's a part of the physical and mental health picture for women?
Absolutely, 100%. I think it is a component of being a healthy woman. I honest to God do. And that's why we're developing this. I just wrote to my research partner, this Dr. Michael Schwartz, this week about this arc of healing and how these theories, these models, these treatment models that we're talking about, like amygdala reduction, the amygdala reduction treatment model, like if a woman comes in and she's been traumatized, then we start, the focus is on reducing the trauma and creating safety. That the arc of the healing is we create safety first. That's number one. So we forget about the orgasm in the sense, and we focus on the healing of what needs to heal here. And it could even be I know when I first started using cannabis, the first time I used it in like 2018, I used it to try to do orgasmic meditation with this guy, right? If he brings over his bong and I take 3 hits, and I'm like, I heard this could help. And I take the first hit, nothing happens. I take the second hit, nothing happens. The third hit, I got to lay down. I took too much, but I went on a trip, and it pinpointed exactly where I was being emotionally abused in my marriage, the exact spot. So the point I want to make is these things gives us insight to unlock even brain patterns and brain, like where I was locked up in my own. And you know what else is really cool about cannabis? It's the female plant. It's the female. She can only bloom she can't bloom if she gets penetrated by, if she gets fertilized by the male. She can't bloom. She would have seeds.
Yeah.
She'll have babies. If you want to smoke or use cannabis, we need the flower. So we need, in a sense, the virgin. So her potency, she's potent. The cannabis plant is potent in being fully feminine. Yeah. And I think she empowers us to become our full feminine. That's what we become with our orgasm. Are we already there? Our time goes by so fast.
It does, doesn't it?